So you just got off a call with a golden prospect and the call went perfectly. Everything you said was textbook. They were super excited to work with you. They basically told you 100% yes, they're going to hire you. And so after the call, you say you'll touch base, you send them an email a few days later, and no response. So then you send them another email, and again, no response. Maybe you have your read receipts on, and you can tell that they've looked at the email, but no response. And so then you get their number, and you call them, and they send you straight to voicemail. And you're sitting there wondering, what the heck did I do wrong, where they could go from the absolute golden prospect giving me verbal yeses to ignoring me. And this all comes down to the follow-up. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 5 tips that you can implement right away to be more efficient with your follow-up so these clients aren't ghosting you and so you can get them to the point where they sign much, much quicker. So let's get into it. Looking back on my early years as a freelance web designer has taught me a lot, but one of the things that I regret the most and one of the things that I struggled with the most was having the confidence to follow up in the right way. Now, I would have a lot of great sales calls, things would go well, I would send them an email a day after, and then I would just sit and think, okay, the ball's in their court, I'm just gonna wait for them to think on this, it's a big decision, and this was just an excuse because I was too nervous to bug them or continually reach out to them if they weren't ready to make a decision. Now, I've since realized that I was doing this all wrong because there is a tasteful way that you can follow up without bugging people, without putting pressure on them, but also maintaining close enough contact that you can get them from that first call all the way through these different touch points until they finally sign the agreement and pay the deposit. And so there are 5 tips that I have nailed down that are going to make a huge difference for you when it comes to the follow-up. And I guarantee that if you do these things and implement them, you're going to find that your prospects and your first calls are going to get to the point where they sign much more quickly and much more often, but also then you're not going to have to generate as many new leads, right? If you're getting 10 calls a month, but if you're closing 8 out of 10 of those, that's great. Otherwise, you could go try to generate 100 a month, but only close 2 of them. And so follow-up is the key. It's going to be your bread and butter. And so let's jump into my 5 tips. Tip number 1 for following up is spacing out your contact with the prospect. So what I mean by that is after your first call, you're going to want to send a follow-up email that outlines everything that you talked about. And you're going to want to have a plan for the next time that you're going to follow up with them, which probably is going to be the next day. But after that, you don't want to follow up every single day. Instead, follow up 3 days later, and then 4 days later, and then 5 days later. And so over the span of 2 weeks, you're maybe going to follow up 4 or 5 times. But by doing this, it's going to make it seem much less like you're pressuring them and much more like you're just checking in and being helpful through their decision-making process. So space out your contacts. Tip number 2 goes right along with that, and that is that you're going to notify them of every single time you're going to follow up. And so what I do is after my first call, I tell them I will send you an email immediately after our call outlining everything that we're going through. And then if I don't hear anything from you, I will touch base tomorrow afternoon. Now in that email, phone call, whatever it is that I'm utilizing to follow up, once I chat with them, and if they're not quite there, I'll say, hey, that's totally fine. I know you need time to look through some things. What I'll do is I'll give you 3 days and I'll put you on my calendar for Thursday and I'll reach out to touch base just to see if I can help with anything. By telling them when you're going to reach out, they're going to be much more accepting of the fact that you reached out and they're not going to feel bugged. Tip number 3 is in every single one of these points of contact, you want to be really specific. And one thing that I see a lot is we send them over an email that says, hey, just checking in. Do you have any questions? And that's just too general and it doesn't really encourage them to give you a response. So instead, what I like to do is have some specific question in every single follow-up that they then have to respond. So for example, in my first or second follow-up, I'm going to say, hey, I'm just touching base. I wanted to see what you thought about that timeline. Is that timeline going to work for you? By asking a specific question, it's going to promote a response and it's going to make them have to reach back out to you to continue that conversation. Tip number 4 is using verbiage that doesn't make you sound like you're needy. The last thing that you want to do is put across this vibe that you're really needy and you're really desperate to land this client. So instead of saying something like, hey, we're really looking forward to getting this project started. When can we start? We're ready to go. Instead, you're going to use phrases like, hey, I just thought about you this morning. I thought I would touch base and see how we can help you out. Or saying something to the effect of, just checking in so you don't think that I forgot about you. These are really great phrases to maintain contact without seeming needy. And tip number 5, which is our last tip, is don't rely too much on email. Sometimes it's really easy to hide behind your keyboard, send emails, and feel like you're doing, your sales process. When in reality, you should never be sending more than 2 emails without a response before you call them. And so if I email somebody and ask them a question, they don't respond, I will go right back to that email, I'll resurface it. If it doesn't get answered, I will call them up right away. This is going to show initiative, and it's going to show them that you care. Just this last week, I had a client that literally ghosted like 5 or 6 of my emails over a 2-week period, and he'd even dodged a couple of my calls, and I just kept calling him because he hadn't given me a no, and he still acted interested. So I called him one day at kind of a random time during lunch, and he picked up the phone and he said, yeah, Peyton, we've been meaning to do this. I'm sorry I keep putting it off. I see your emails, but I still have to touch base with my partner. And so after that call, we immediately were able to finalize an agreement, and he paid the deposit that afternoon. And so that's a really good example of just sticking to the process, continuing to follow up, and unless you get a super solid no, just continue that follow-up process. Use the phone calls, use text messages, emails, whatever you have to do to keep enough pressure where they feel like you're there to support them to make this decision. So if you're interested in more sales techniques like this, whether it's how to do a sales call or following up or how to generate web design leads, we have a new web design sales mastery course that is live on our website. At the time of filming this, it is in a discounted pre-sale or pre-order stage. And so if you would like to grab that, the link is down below. We put a lot of work into this course, really laying out everything that goes into finding web design leads, meeting them, walking them through a sales call, following up, doing everything that you need to go from having no clients to landing $10,000, $20,000, even $30,000 website clients every single month. So if you're interested in that, you can find that link down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.